In Chapter 1, Nevare recalls his court-martial, enduring the pain of leg irons and knowing his fate. Accused of horrific crimes, including murder and desecration, Nevare feels condemned by a corrupt justice system. His defense, led by his friend Spink, fails to help him as witnesses pile on fabricated evidence. Sentenced to hang, with the added horror of 1,000 lashes, Nevare sees no escape from disgrace and punishment. However, the magic he's fought against intervenes, creating a chance to flee. After a violent encounter with Captain Thayer's men who nearly kill him, Nevare escapes Geddes, a dead man in spirit. In Chapter 2, Nevare flees Geddes on horseback, aiming to leave his former life behind. He encounters Tiber, who fails to recognize him, and retrieves essentials from his cabin. Nevare convinces Kesey he's a dream to avoid interference. Unable to wield iron due to Speck magic, Nevare abandons his horse, Clove, and enters the forest on foot. He experiences the forest's natural beauty and reflects on his past with Dewara and the magic's control over his life. Realizing he has no choice but to obey the magic, he sets off for the Barrier Mountains to find the Specks. In Chapter 3, Nevare struggles through the forest, reaching Tree Woman's stump and finding it weakened. Lysana urges him to check the King's Road, where he sees that the Gernians are advancing, destroying the forest. Nevare reflects on his divided loyalties and the devastation the road brings. He resolves to use his magic to halt its progress, even though the colonel had dismissed his concerns. Nevare sees that the road's relentless advance will destroy the forest, severing his connection to it. Determined, he begins strategizing, intent on stopping the road and saving the forest for both peoples. In Chapter 4, Nevare channels his magic to disrupt the King's Road, commanding plants to reclaim the land. Guards notice the disturbance but remain frozen by fear. Drained of strength, Nevare meets a dying tree spirit who condemns his efforts, warning that merely delaying the road won't protect the forest. Nevare proposes redirecting the road, hoping for coexistence between Gernians and Specks. Exhausted and unable to feel his legs, he offers himself to the tree, suggesting it take nourishment from him to survive. As his life fades, he reflects on his isolation and wonders what others will think when they find him. In Chapter 5, Soldier's Boy awakens weak and starving, cared for by Likari as Olika distances herself. Firata openly defends her bond with Jadoli against Olika, accusing her sister of trying to manipulate him for her own gain. Despite Olikia's resentment, Soldier's Boy agrees to quick walk her back to the people if she helps gather food to restore his strength. Confronted with his emaciated state and Olika's accusations, Soldier's Boy feels the weight of his failures. Jadoli questions Soldier's Boy's loyalty, pressing him to recognize the Gernians as intruders, further complicating Soldier's Boy's divided loyalties. In Chapter 6, Nevare remains passive as Soldier's Boy takes over. Olika and Likari care for him, but tension lingers, particularly with Firata. Nevare is visited by Orandala, the god of balances, who demands a death for Nevare's actions. Nevare faces his terror as Soldier's Boy remains unaware. Olika insists on feeding Soldier's Boy to restore his strength, though she sees him as a tool for her ambitions. Soldier's Boy agrees to share food with others, but questions Olika's motives. After the meal, Olika helps Soldier's Boy bathe, and he experiences an overwhelming sense of change as whispers fill the air. In Chapter 7, Soldier's Boy, Olika, and Likari rush to stop Epony, who has set afire to kill Lysana in revenge for Nevare's death. Soldier's Boy intervenes, but Epony confronts him, threatening Lysana. Tensions rise as Epony claims Soldier's Boy is not Nevare. Lysana explains they are one being. Epony, desperate, threatens to kill Soldier's Boy, but hesitates when he orders Olika and Likari to leave. Alone with Soldier's Boy, Epony demands to know what he wants in exchange for sparing him. Eventually, she strikes him unconscious, ending the confrontation with sorrow and resignation. In Chapter 8, Soldier's Boy recovers after being knocked unconscious. Tree Woman advises him to accept his life, and Jadoli suggests he rejoin the people. Soldier's Boy decides to stay for 3 more days before heading to the wintering place. After foraging for food, he reflects on his past and future, contemplating his actions while under the magic's influence. Soldier's Boy leads his companions on a long, exhausting journey, pushing them relentlessly forward through harsh conditions. As they rest, he reveals that Lysana's memories guide him, and he anticipates challenges upon reaching the wintering place. In Chapter 9, Soldier's Boy wakes feverish and weak, with Nevare trapped within him. As they travel through a mountain crevasse, Soldier's Boy uses magic to restore plants, while Olika worries about their supplies. They reach a cavern where Soldier's Boy undergoes a ritual to become more like the Specks. He is exhausted and feverish, causing Nevare to experience dreams, including a vivid encounter with Epony, who reveals troubling news about Spink and Amzil. Eventually, Soldier's Boy, despite his weakened state, agrees to continue the journey, moving on through the dark with Olika and Likari. In Chapter 10, Soldier's Boy succumbs to fever during their journey with Likari and Olika tending to him. The narrator, struggling with Soldier's Boy's illness, attempts a dream walk to reach Jarl. In the dream, Jarl vents her frustrations about Calder Steet and Professor Steet, but the narrator warns her not to trust any negative rumors. The narrator reflects on Soldier's Boy's plans and the potential consequences. Likari stays by Soldier's Boy, caring for him. As Soldier's Boy rests, Likari expresses pride in being a feeder, and the narrator briefly takes control, grateful for the boy's care. In Chapter 11, Nevare wakes up feeling better after his fever breaks. He, Olakea, and Likari share a meal, and Olakea explains the significance of the wintering place. Nevare struggles with the scars marking him as a Speck. He delays returning to the village until he feels stronger. Olakea leaves for the trading meet, and Nevare with Likari searches for Lysana's old house. Nevare hunts, using his magic to help, and is pleased with his success. He reflects on his need to appear powerful at the trading place. Back at the cabin, he and Likari prepare a hare for dinner. In Chapter 12, Soldier's Boy and Likari settle into Lysana's lodge, where Soldier's Boy uses magic to repair the structure. While sorting through Lysana's belongings, he finds treasures and struggles with grief over his past. Meanwhile, Nevare attempts dream walking and connects with Epony in her dream. They discuss his situation, the growing tension between the Gernians and Specks, and the possibility of seeking the Queen's help to stop the destruction of the trees. Nevare also visits Amzil in a dream, but she rejects him, having built emotional walls. Nevare fears losing himself to Soldier's Boy. In Chapter 13, Soldier's Boy awakens with a plan to build strength for winter, focusing on food and magic. He and Likari gather and feast on fish, but a croaker bird interrupts, demanding a debt be repaid. Soldier's Boy denies any debt, but the bird insists on a choice, life or death. Likari drives the bird away, and the Soldier's Boy expresses gratitude. They continue their feast, preparing for the upcoming journey to the trading place. Soldier's Boy also stores magic in his body, while Likari helps with fishing, and both eat heavily to prepare for the future. They leave for the trading place on the 4th day. In Chapter 14, Soldier's Boy, in better health, travels to the trading place with Likari. Overwhelmed by the market and the ocean, he relies on Olakea to trade Lysana's treasures for clothing and necessities. She skillfully negotiates, securing valuable items. They encounter Moma, who becomes interested in Lysana's fertility charm, the Ivory Child, which Olakea refuses to trade. Tensions rise, but a silent agreement forms between Olakea and Moma. After trading, Soldier's Boy, feeling exhausted, retreats to the seawater pools while Olakea heads to gather food, ensuring his comfort and commanding respect in his new role. In Chapter 15, Soldier's Boy and his group are visited by a young girl from Kinrove, bringing gifts and an invitation to meet Kinrove. Soldier's Boy, while pleased by the offerings, perceives a subtle insult in the treatment and recognizes the invitation is likely a strategy to gain the Ivory Child fertility charm. Olakea plans their response carefully, instructing Soldier's Boy to appear indifferent to Kinrove's luxury to assert his position. Despite tension between them, the group sets out for Kinrove's camp, where Soldier's Boy experiences a moment of dizziness, hinting at potential dangers within the camp's boundaries. In Chapter 16, Kinrove showcases his power by transporting the group to his pavilion, where a ritualistic dance takes place. He reveals his knowledge of Soldier's Boy and Nevare's past, hinting at Nevare's potential role in resolving the conflict. Tensions rise when Dasi challenges Nevare, demanding Kinrove's death, accusing him of sacrificing their people for his magic. Kinrove defends his actions, recounting the devastation of a previous battle with the intruders. Dasi insists on fighting the invaders directly. In a final confrontation, Daisy unleashes a magic that dismantles Kinrove's protective barriers, signaling a dramatic shift. In Chapter 17, Daisy attacks Kinrove's encampment using iron chains to weaken his magic. She demands the release of the enslaved dancers, pushing Kinrove to reluctantly agree to her demands. As the battle rages, Daisy confronts Jadoli, questioning whether he intends to oppose her. He speaks against her approach, warning that killing the intruders won't stop them from returning. Meanwhile, Daisy threatens Soldier's Boy, who struggles against Iron's influence. He insists that Kinrove's dance is the key to defending against the intruders. Daisy, despite her fury, listens, and the chapter ends with the tension unresolved. In Chapter 18, Soldier's Boy regains strength and plans an attack with Dasi, using fear and greed to manipulate the Gernians. He suppresses Nevare as he consolidates power, but Dasi grows uneasy with their methods. Soldier's Boy decides to summon Kinrove again, despite Dasi's objections. Olika warns him of the dangers, sharing her experience of the summoning. Soldier's Boy contemplates the consequences, particularly the sacrifice of his people. Meanwhile, he discusses his plans with Lysana, revealing his intent to attack the Gernians without warning, targeting their town and fort at night and using their own tactics against them. In Chapter 19, Soldier's Boy confronts Daisy about their use of magic as tensions rise within his group. The summoning dance tragically claims Lakari's life, deeply affecting Olakea. Soldier's Boy, aiming to solidify his leadership, plans an attack on Geddes to reclaim peace by driving out the invaders. He manipulates the situation to rally support, gaining control over his kin clan. His strategy involves using fire and surprise to destroy Geddes, freeing the prison laborers and leaving no trace behind. He reassures Olakea, promising to bring Lakari back, but doubts linger about the success of his plan. In Chapter 20, Soldier's Boy leads his army toward Geddes, preparing for an attack using fire and weapons. He convinces the Great Ones, despite their reluctance, to quick-walk the troops. Meanwhile, Nevare dreams of warning Epony about the impending attack, but her laudanum-induced state prevents her from acting. Nevare also reaches Spink, urging him to prepare Geddes for the assault. As Soldier's Boy's troops begin their march, he struggles with doubts and dissatisfaction with their readiness. Despite their disorganization and lack of discipline, the soldiers are driven by hatred. The chapter ends as they prepare for battle. In Chapter 21, Soldier's Boy leads an attack on Geddes, intending to massacre its inhabitants. As the warriors set fires and kill soldiers attempting to flee, Soldier's Boy's ruthless campaign continues. At the prison, freed prisoners turn on their liberators, causing confusion. Despite the fire, Soldier's Boy presses on, guiding his warriors through the smoke-filled town. He orders a retreat when facing gunfire, but struggles to maintain control. As they near the fort's north gate, an ambush occurs, resulting in heavy casualties. Soldier's Boy escapes, but not without reflection on the consequences of his brutal actions. In Chapter 22, Soldier's Boy leads his group after the failed Geddes attack. He attempts to heal Dasi, but the iron in her wound prevents him. Daisy dies, and her body is sent to the ancestor trees, where her spirit is accepted. Soldier's Boy reflects on his doubts about the magic and decides to continue without it. During the burial rites, the group sings long songs about Daisy, recounting memories of her life. Soldier's Boy feels connected to the ancestors as he joins in, realizing his place among the Specks. He briefly connects with Lysana's spirit, but soon returns to the cold reality. In Chapter 23, Soldier's Boy remains emotionally distant as the Specks prepare to migrate. He contacts Lysana to offer magic in exchange for updates on Geddes. Through Epony, Nevare learns of the harsh conditions in Geddes, including food shortages and the suffering of Spink and the baby. Nevare promises to speak with her father about sending aid. He attempts to contact his uncle and aunt for help, but receives no meaningful responses. Nevare also checks in on his sister Jarl, who shares troubling news about their father's mental state and Calder's uncle's behavior. Soldier's Boy reflects on the failure to protect the forest. In Chapter 24, Soldier's Boy faces guilt and isolation after his failure to save Lakari. Olakea confronts him for abandoning her son, and she decides to search for him alone. Soldier's Boy reflects on his decisions and the consequences of his actions. As he contemplates merging with Nevare to harness the full power of magic, they struggle with their shared identity. Soldier's Boy urges Nevare to accept the merger, but Nevare refuses, unable to accept the consequences. Despite this, Soldier's Boy resolves to make a difficult bargain with Kinrove, leaving Nevare uncertain of their future. In Chapter 25, Soldier's Boy and Olika reach Kinrove's camp with Lysana's treasure. They are stopped by a magical barrier, but gain entry after offering the treasure and fertility charm. Inside, Olika demands Lakari's release, which Kinrove agrees to. Soldier's Boy seeks Kinrove's help to reunite his halves, claiming it's the only solution. Kinrove, frustrated, reluctantly agrees to help but warns of the physical and magical strain involved. Soldier's Boy accepts the challenge despite his reservations. Kinrove orders preparations for the ritual, including special food and a hot bath. Olikia continues to care for Likari, refusing to let anyone interfere. In Chapter 26, Soldier's Boy undergoes a transformative ritual, merging his Gernian and mage sides through a chaotic dance guided by Kinrove. During the dance, Soldier's Boy completes several crucial tasks, including destroying the spindle, freeing the Kidona, and imprinting vital knowledge onto his sister Jarl. Despite the intense physical strain, he connects with his family, especially his father, who expresses his final wishes. As Soldier's Boy's body deteriorates, he follows an internal pull, eventually reaching a familiar place where he chooses a small tree, signaling his final decision. Kinrove orders him to be bound to it, marking the end of his journey. In Chapter 27, Nevare is bound to a tree, his body tortured as roots merge with him. Lysana, communicating through the tree, reassures him, though warns of the uncertain magic. Orandula, a god, demands a choice from Nevare, life or death. Nevare offers his death, and Orandula agrees. As croaker birds begin feasting on Nevare's corpse, Lysana tries to keep Nevare's soul intact, fearing Orandula's intentions. Nevare experiences intense pain, and Lysana holds him, vowing to protect him. Orandula continues to torment Nevare, who begs for mercy. Finally, Orandula agrees, and Nevare fades into darkness. In Chapter 28, Nevare awakens in a decayed state, with his body ravaged and magic drained. He struggles to survive, stumbling through the forest and attempting to connect with Olikia and Likari, but they fail to recognize him. As he grapples with his identity, Nevare realizes that his body has changed and his magic is gone. His attempts to communicate with others, including Kilakura and Jadoli, are met with rejection. Jadoli uses magic to keep the camp's inhabitants from acknowledging Nevare's presence. Nevare, feeling like a ghost, confronts Orandula, who reveals that he is neither fully dead nor alive. In Chapter 29, Nevare reflects on his past, particularly his relationship with Lysana and the life Soldier's Boy stole from him. He finds the construction on the King's Road abandoned and scavenges supplies. Upon arriving in Geddes, he meets Kizi, who shares news of a gold rush and the decline of the town. Nevare learns that Captain Thayer now leads the regiment. Kizi agrees to deliver a message to Nevare's cousin, Lieutenant Kester. While waiting, Nevare cleans Kessie's cabin and reflects on his identity. Eventually, Epony arrives with a baby, and Nevare is overwhelmed with emotions. In Chapter 30, Nevare reunites with Epony and learns about recent hardships in Geddes, including food shortages caused by a Speck raid. Epony recounts how Sergeant Durrell's arrival with supplies helped them through the crisis, and shares news that Nevare's family has gained wealth from a gold strike discovered by Jarl, enhancing their status. Nevare reflects on the mysterious influence of his Speck magic. Epony also updates him on changes at the Academy, including the restorative effects of Bitter Springs water. Their conversation is interrupted when Spink arrives urgently, informing Nevare that Amsel has been arrested for murder. In Chapter 31, Nevare returns to Geddes, learning from Spink that Amsel has been falsely accused of murder and sentenced to hang by Captain Thayer, who is enforcing oppressive rules in the town. Nevare decides to help save Amsel despite the danger, and as they travel through Geddes, they witness the aftermath of destruction and tension. When an old acquaintance, Scout Tiber, recognizes Nevare, Epony fabricates a story to cover his identity, suggesting he's visiting for health reasons. Upon arriving at Spink's home, Nevare sees Amsel's children, grateful for Epony and Spink's care, and resolves to locate and save Amsel. In Chapter 32, Nevare prepares to rescue Amsel, sentenced to hang. Epony proposes hiding Amsel or faking her escape with Spink's assistance, despite the personal risks they all face. They gather essentials for Amsel's children, aiming for a swift getaway. Nevare bonds with the children, especially Kara, who recalls him helping their family before. Kara reveals a hidden emergency plan Amsel had prepared. As Epony places the children with a friend for the night, she and Nevare share a somber moment, knowing the stakes. With everything ready, Nevare dons his disguise, setting the stage for their high-risk rescue attempt. In Chapter 33, Nevare faces Captain Thayer, who reveals deep regret for past actions. Nevare exploits Thayer's instability, securing the jail keys to reach Amsel. In the jail, he finds Amsel and her daughter Kara caught in Lysana's roots. As roots entrap Nevare, Amsel breaks him free by igniting lanterns, weakening the roots with fire. Together, they escape with Kara and quietly navigate the dark streets. They reach the cottage where Amsel's other children, Sem and Dia, wait with a ready cart. Nevare, Amsel, and the children flee into the night, leaving Geddes behind. In Chapter 34, Nevare and Amsel continue their journey, facing challenges and seeking a new life. Nevare is in pain from his feet, while Amsel cares for the children. They meet Tiber, who updates them on Geddes. After marrying in a small town, they settle in Thicket, where Nevare struggles with his past and his desire to become a soldier. Amsel encourages him to pursue this dream. Nevare receives letters from his family, including one from his uncle, urging him to return home due to his father's failing health and his duty as the family heir.